In the middle of those harsh winter campaigns, especially up in Italy's mountain passes and the forests of Eastern Europe, soldiers kept writing about this small, almost throwaway item that shows up far more often than you'd expect, the improvised heat can. Not a lantern, not a stove, just a tin can packed with a blend of fat, fibre and wax that burned for an entire day and produced enough heat to take the edge off a frozen dugout or a stone-walled ruin that served as temporary shelter. You see it referenced in quartermaster reports, Red Cross instructional sheets and small unit survival memos. It wasn't glamorous and it wasn't standardized, but it kept men alive when fuel was scarce and nights were brutal. When you read those accounts carefully, you start noticing a pattern. The same ingredients, same building method, same burn time. The heat can wasn't random improvisation. It followed a formula, passed informally between units, field medics and resistance groups. And here's the interesting part. The physics behind it still holds today. If you build one correctly, you can heat a small room long enough to get through a blackout or an emergency with no electricity, no stove and no modern gear. Let's go straight into how the WWII formula actually worked. The fundamental principle behind the 24-hour survival candle is simple. The hotter and slower a fuel source burns, the more efficient it becomes. Soldiers didn't have paraffin blocks or alcohol stoves. What they had was waste grease from field kitchens, fat trimmed off rations, and the simplest wick material you can imagine. Strips of cotton or twisted paper. The base can was almost always a standard ration tin. They filled it with alternating layers of fibrous material and melted fat or wax. The fibre served two purposes. It acted as a wick booster and prevented the fuel from liquefying into a pool, which would burn too quickly. Cardboard spiralled into discs was a common choice. So were cotton scraps, gauze, or torn bandage rolls. Today you can reproduce this with cotton mop strands, cardboard strips, or even denim. The key is density. Pack it tight enough that the fuel saturates everything, but still leaves air gaps so the flame can draw oxygen. If you read technical manuals of the era, you'll find an unspoken rule. Too much fat and the candle floods. Too little and it burns out in hours. The ideal mix turned out to be roughly a 60-40 blend. More fuel than wick, but enough wick to keep the flame controlled. Melted tallow, lard or drippings were poured slowly into the packed can, then allowed to harden. The soldiers knew the formula burned hotter than wax alone because animal fats contain long-chain triglycerides that release steady heat when they combust. That meant the candle provided actual warmth, not just light. For a modern version, you melt a combination of paraffin and cooking fat and pour it into your fibre-packed can. Paraffin stabilizes the burn and fat increases the heat output. You get the same effect the soldiers relied on, but with more consistency. People often underestimate how effective slow, radiant heat can be. One can doesn't heat the entire space instantly. What it does is raise the mean temperature gradually, while reducing moisture and providing a stable heat source. Several World War II survival guides explain that a heat can placed inside a stone or metal enclosure warmed the surrounding mass, which then radiated heat outward for hours. Units stationed in partially collapsed buildings used two techniques. First, they placed the candle on a metal or stone plate to absorb heat and distribute it evenly. Second, they positioned reflective surfaces, mess tin lids, pot covers, or even polished helmets behind the flame to direct warmth toward the user. If you want to test it now, simply put your survival candle near a brick wall or inside an open Dutch oven. The material you see absorbs heat and radiates it back at you, creating a small bubble of warmth far more efficiently than just the naked flame. In occupied territories, staying hidden mattered just as much as staying warm. The survival candle became popular because it produced minimal smoke and a low, stable flame that didn't give off the same profile as a wood fire. British SOE guides taught downed pilots to build what they called dark burns using wax-heavy mixtures. These produced less soot and offered controlled heat for drying wet clothes or warming hands without alerting anyone nearby. You can still replicate this by increasing the paraffin proportion and, using tightly coiled cotton as the wick. A single can will burn quietly for much of the night without bright flare-ups. Here's the part most people miss. The WWII heat can wasn't used in isolation. Soldiers learned to turn it into a microheater by placing an inverted metal pot or small tin over it. Holes near the base allowed air to flow in, and holes at the top allowed heat to escape. The pot amplified convection and projected heat outward like a miniature stove. To apply this today, set your candle on a fire-safe surface. Place a metal pot or large can upside down over it. Then create 4 small vents around the bottom edge and one on top. You now have a blackout-safe microheater that pushes warm air upward far more effectively than the bare flame. It works because you're channeling convection instead of wasting it. For serious survivalists who want a historically accurate build, Step 1. Clean a tin can. Soup or vegetable size is perfect. Step 2. Pack it tightly with cardboard strips rolled into a spiral or layered cotton fabric. Step 3. Melt a mix of paraffin wax and any solid cooking fat. Step 4. Pour slowly until the material is fully saturated. Step 5. Insert 1 or 2 cotton wicks above the fuel line. Step 6. Let it cool fully so the surface hardens. This part is, really important for the process to work as intended. That is the original field method. Follow it and you will consistently get long burns and high heat output. The value of the 24-hour survival candle isn't nostalgia, it's reliability. When the grid goes down, batteries die, fuel evaporates and electronics fail, but wax and fat don't. They sit quietly until you need them. People living through wartime shortages understood that you don't rely on what's convenient. You rely on what always works. This is the kind of historical knowledge that earns its place in any survival toolkit. Simple materials, proven results, and no dependence on modern infrastructure. If you found this useful, subscribe, share this video with fellow history lovers, and help keep strange history digging up the practical wartime knowledge the world forgot.